we've got two new sets coming to Epic 7 in Otherworldly Breach. Pursuit and Warfare will be rotating out, and we'll be getting Weakening set, which is a 4-piece set that increases your speed by 15%. This is 10% less than Speed set, but in exchange it increases your chance of inflicting debuffs by 15%. And note that this is most likely something like Briarwitch S3 has 85% chance of Death Break will become 100, and it won't make you ignore 15% innate resistance, because that is worded differently. You can check at the imprint circuit, it's worded as like the maximum applicable effectiveness chance or effect chance, whatever, is 100% is how that's worded, so this is probably different. And then Fervor set, a 2-piece set at the start of an extra turn, increases the damage of the next attack by 20%, so this is for units that typically have a big nuke turn after an extra turn. There's a lot of these. Let's take a look at all of the best users for these two sets, starting off with Fervor, because I think Fervor is a lot more interesting. So, Fervor set, we've got a few tiers here. Best in slot is the units where I think that you're just going to want this 2-piece set on them in pretty much any situation. I think Salome is actually down here. And then Depends is, there's going to be like reasons why you may or may not want it on them. And then No is just no, like, don't. Then the Shirley tier is because, so they like have consistently made units that benefit a lot from these sets, such as Warfare set for Nodos, and then Pursuit set for like Monarch or the Swordess area. RNL, the artifact, is an extra turn artifact. I would not be very surprised if the RNL unit had a lot of extra turns and actually benefited a ton from Fervor set, so surely it's good for her. We'll see. Looking at the actual best in the slot users, Genesis Ross is the first one, just because this makes his S3 do so much damage. Like, sure, there's going to be some niche situations, I think, where maybe you can't press your S2 for whatever reason, you somehow let yourself get B-Dom trapped, or you just want to hold your S2, maybe to, like, save the seal for something later, and that could lower your S3 damage, but I think generally you're just going to like want to press S2 into S3, or nothing's really stopping you from pressing S2 into S3. This could change in the future with like more units that can potentially punish Ross for pressing S2, but it's going to be such a big damage increase to his S3, especially if you're building a damage Ross right now. You need to be on Torrent set, and Torrent set reduces your HP. Thankfully, it's like it reduces based on your base HP and not actually a portion of your total HP, so it's not that big of a damage loss, but it's still a damage loss, so Fervor set would actually be a bit more than just going from 10% to 20% on your S3. You would lose the damage on your S2 and your S1, but, you know, his S3 does pretty much most of his damage. It's a lot. Argent Waves Hua Young, her S2 loses out on the 10% from Torrent, but her S3 gains the 20% from Fervor, and note that her S3 is AoE, so overall it'll be a damage increase. I don't think you're really going to have situations where it's like, damn, I really needed my S2 to kill and now I'm dead. Generally, especially just like with how I've been using her, rather have the S3 damage, and this isn't really relevant anymore because they nerfed the interaction, but Tower Renock was very annoying to deal with, and you needed a certain amount of bulk on Hua Young. Getting the bulk back from not having to run Torrent set would be useful if Tower Renock was still a problem. Maybe she'll need the bulk more in the future as well, just a potential consideration. Architect Leica is a good example of a unit that's just kind of one and done. You press S2, you press S3, and you're done. So let's boost the S3 damage. You S2, you get your little target debuff, and you S3, big boom, and you're done. Yeah, Lilibet also pretty much the same thing. Her damage is all loaded into her S3. Her S2 damage does not really matter, so we don't have to worry too much about losing out on the Torrent on her S2. We'd rather just have the S3 boost, so we're going to be running this on her, I think. Eternal Wanderer Ludwig, so his damage rotation, you do, like, his S1 and S2 do damage. It's just most of his damage is in his S3 nuke, so I think he would benefit a ton from this. There also have been situations in the past where his, like, the HP you lose from Torrent has sucked in certain situations because it just made him so squishy, which won't be an issue anymore either. Maybe he ends up in Depends, to be honest, but I feel like you're just going to be using Fervor set on Ludwig just for his S3 nuke. Surely you're not going to end up in a situation where you'd never actually extra turn instantly rip S3. I think I actually have set up cleaves like that before, so I'm going to move him down here. I'm going to move him over here. Top model Luluka, you press S2, you press S3, and you nuke. She's also more or less a one-and-done unit, and I think killing with her S3 is going to be more important than your S1, so we're going to say it's her best in slot. CDOM, no one uses this unit, but she S3s into S1, big nuke. She would benefit a ton from Fervor set if she was allowed to exist. Roy Mustang does not really exist either, but he's kind of a similar case to Mudwig, except you are going to be able to use your S1 Soulburns, you kind of have to. So if he was allowed to exist, you would spam S1, and then your big S3 nuke would benefit from Fervor set. Let's talk about Depends. We already talked about Mudwig, and he's a good example of Depends, just because, like, maybe you end up in that, like, cleave where you never actually press any of your Soulburns for whatever reason. Salome, the main thing for Depends here is that you might want immunity on your Salome. Otherwise, if you don't need immunity, it's our best in slot. Because there's a kind of a funny interaction where in Strategic Archive, if you copied Fumir, you would have noticed that your Salome, or your copied Fumir S3 would do more damage than the actual Fumir, and that's because I guess the Salome had Pursuit set for some reason on her. So this does... Your sets do carry over. Assuming Fervor works the exact same way, this means that anybody that Salome copies would get a 20% damage boost, and it's just going to be her best in slot if you don't need the immunity set. So yeah, that's kind of crazy, just a free 20% for anybody. Successor Teo, is it his best in slot? Yes. Fervor set does out-damage Pen set, assuming you only have to attack once. However, does he need the help? Not really. I think Successor Teo kind of kills whatever he looks at, because you just Death Break into one-shot them. So, do you need to farm a set for him? No. Just run your old Pen set, you're probably fine. Your broken set is probably murdering anything you look at, honestly. You probably don't ever need the S1 twice with him, and even if you did, you're probably killing anyways, so it doesn't really matter. Ran, is it his best in slot? Yes. However, or it's his best in slot for his S3 damage. However, you just want to go fastest set, right? So I don't think it really matters. Tori is a really fun case because generally, is it good? No. She takes too many turns. If you ever have to attack more than once, you lose damage net. So let's say like 2 Tori S1s, your first one 0%, second one 20%, that is less damage than just having 2 10% S1s, 10% being Torin set. So generally not good on her, but Master of the Nightmare Tori, you get so many extra turns. Is it consistent? No, but is it funny? Yes, I think that one would be a really funny setup to run, where you run Fervor Tori on Master of Nightmare, and then your damage is just going up and down, depending on whether or not you proc your extra turns. So I might try and set that up. That sounds like fun. Ludwig we already talked about. Zahawk, it depends on whether or not you really need your S3 to kill, because, like I mentioned, if you have to attack twice, you lose out on the damage. So your first hit will be more damage compared to the Torrent, and your second will be less. And overall, if you're hitting the same unit twice, for example, it would be less damage overall. If you really need your S3 to kill, then go Fervor. If you need your S1's damage, and it's like you need it to kill, then go Torrent. Or Pen. Sorry, go Pen set. Renock, unless you're like an absurdly high attack Renock, Pursuit's just going to be more damage, but it's spread damage, which like isn't really a problem. Or like just going Pursuit Renock is going to be better. If you really need your S3 to kill for some reason, then you can go Fervor, but it's like her S1 does a solid chunk of damage, not insignificant, so I think losing out on that damage kind of sucks as well. And she does also kind of have the ran issue where you really just want to be super fast. Melissa, she gets like her extra turn after laying down the curse, and you can blow somebody up with that, but kind of a similar thing where you just don't want to, like, if you have to hit a bunch of times, it's not that great. Vector Tenebria, Soulburn spam into S3. I mean, these are like dead units, so whatever. So let's talk about the nose. Why would you not want to use Fervor Set on somebody? We've kind of gone over some of them. Units that have to attack a bunch aren't going to benefit. So especially PvE units like Breek. You S2 and then you S1 or S3, but you're attacking so many times in the fight, it is a pretty significant damage loss overall. I was debating whether or not to say massive, but in terms of just looking like at just his own damage, yes, it's a massive damage loss. So yeah, Sermia, same thing. Spirit Iceline, same thing. You're attacking a bunch. Straze and Ida, like, they're AoEs, and they have 2 AoEs that they want to get off, and both of their AoEs are important. So losing out on the net damage is not good, especially for Straze, where his S3, you would lose out on the boost on the pen, which I guess is killing anyways, kind of like a Teo situation. But his, like, AoE S3 on the non-pen target is still significant. Ida, her S2 and S3 do, like, the same damage. DDR just doesn't do damage, so you don't need to use it on, like, units that don't do damage. So, like Conch Lilius, same thing. And then Baiken, compared to Lilibet, Baiken's S2 actually does quite a decent chunk of damage, so you would not use it on a unit like this. This is like the single target version of Ida, I guess, where both of the skills actually do meaningful damage. So that's Fervor. I think this is the more, like, interesting one. There's probably roughly, like, 6 or 7 units, like, relevant or somewhat relevant units, I think, that you'd want a Fervor set for. Nothing like super insane, but the Breach sets are typically more niche anyways. Let's take a look at the other one, which is Weakening Set. So Weakening Set boosts your debuff chances by 15%, and I think really the best usage for this has to be units with Ignore Efres, because otherwise you're boosting your chance, sure, but it's still not going to be consistent, and I'm not sure how meaningful that is. It's going to depend heavily on their builds as well. So using this on Briar Witch, you would lose out on some speed, which makes it not really usable for max speed Briar Witch Assaria. However, for Arena Guild War, does Briar need to be max speed? No. Especially for Arena, this helps so much. Being able to 100% death break chance on Arena is going to be very, very nice to play around with. And some like Guild War defenses also don't need you to be top speed. You just run 280 Briar and you're good enough. Somebody like Rando gets hurt a lot more because you need him to be top speed, pretty much. So, yeah, not great losing any speed. Taiwan's not a real unit, but you would benefit a lot from it. Just regular Chloe kind of got power crept. Like, she has Ignore Efres 85%, but who doesn't have Ignore Efres 100% Death Break these days, right? We used her for Magic Nail before, and now she can Ignore Efres 100% Magic Nail plus Death Break. But anybody with 100% Death Break in their kit ignores Efres now in PvE, so she's kind of power crept. Let's skip this one for now. These are units that have like an 85% proc rate in their kit, so Weakening would make it 100%, but it's not Ignore Efres. So like Festivita, your Death Break becomes 100%. However, it's still not guaranteed. It becomes quote unquote 100%, in reality 85%. Your odds of like debuffing normally is like 72.25%, assuming you clear the FRS check. So it would go from 72% to 85, basically. So that's both the Idas. Senya, Haste, and Mui. I just picked some random units. There's probably more. The actual usage for this, I think Senya benefits from this a lot. She gets used sometimes for her provoking PvE in Hall of Trials or Advent, making it 100%. Very, very nice. Less resets, no RNG. And then Haste for Ancient Inheritance likes having the extra debuff chances as well. And this is just kind of a funny thing where, so they're 85% normally, but an EE makes it 100%. This could let you swap to a different EE and still have 100%. It's not Ignore Efres anyway, so it kind of doesn't really matter. That's just potentially a funny use case, maybe for like a future unit that has something similar. Or if they decide to go nuclear and let Fumir ignore Efres for whatever reason. So one more kind of funny thing with Weakening Set, does this apply to artifacts? Because Pursuit applies to artifacts, so what if Weakening Set does? If it does, then here are a bunch of artifacts. These are artifacts that don't have 100% debuff chance in their like base artifact. The important ones here are probably Abyssal Crown and Bubble Maker. These sound horrifying, adding 15% to them. There's a bunch of like random ones here. I'm not going to go super in-depth on this. These are ones that already have 100%, but it needs plus 30. So this could potentially let you hit 100% a little bit earlier without needing plus 30. I'm trying to think exactly what percent you would be at, and I can't think of it, but you wouldn't need plus 30. I think it's like, I want to say it's plus 24. Anyways, yeah, so this is those artifacts. Really, I think Crown, Bubble Maker are like the two big ones, if it works like that. If. We don't know. Even though Pursuit works on artifacts, they could very well make Weakening Set not work. And we'll find out, and like, if it does work like that, adding to the list of Weakening Set users, you would just have a pretty much like an artifact tier, and it's just like units that want to spam stuns and whatever. Or anybody that uses those artifacts, pretty much. I'm not going to add them in. Anyways, that is the users for the two new sets, Weakening and Fervor. Some future units will probably use these as well.